guys, it's Tessa. So today, I figured we would do another one of the little knitting podcast videos. But that's just because it's really hot here. So most of the things I'm working on right now are for like fall/winter. So everything I'm making is keeping me extremely warm. So the project we're gonna work on in this video, which if you've seen my TikTok, you will have seen this project previously. But this is a bottom-up superwash cardigan that is going to be steeked at the end. So I'm currently just working on the body still, but I figured for today's video we would talk about something that I was struggling with for like a good 3 weeks and kind of how I got out of it. A big problem I kind of have because my work or my day job does take a lot out of me emotionally sometimes or mentally, just because a lot of what I do is either working with people all day in kind of a intense environment, or most of what I do as well is making sure that other people are meeting their due dates and things like that, which can be really stressful when we can't miss those due dates. Trying to be a little bit vague just so that, you know, one, you guys don't find out my job, and two, to make sure that I'm not telling too much about myself. As far as you guys know, so far as I live in North California, or Northern California, so yeah. I do work from home, as most of you know, and one of the things about working from home that I love and hate is the fact that I work from home. I often refer to it as a blessing and a curse. It's really nice because I don't have to, you know, get dressed in all fancy for the day and wear like business attire and then go to an office where I'm there for 8 hours and drive home, and it's, you know, 6 p.m. by the time I get home, and then I have to do dinner, all that stuff. Instead, I'm already at home, which is very nice. And the reason why I also feel that working from home is a curse is because I'm a very social person at times, and with the way my position works most of the time, I'm not really talking to anybody directly, and if I am, it's to provide them instructions or figure out what's going on with an assignment or for something like that, and that's really all the social interaction I get. And both my husband and I are pretty much homebodies. I know that sounds kind of contradictory with my I'm social, but for the most part, we stay home. We only really go out on weekends, if that, and even then it's like grocery shopping or running to a store real quick. Point is, all the storytelling, just to say, I recently went through about a 3-week stint of having absolutely no motivation to do anything at all. Now, this is a bit different than having like depression, or something like that, as somebody who has had depression. For me, this was mostly just a significant mental burnout that I went through because one of my coworkers happened to be out of town, and so I essentially took over the majority of her work with 2 other coworkers of mine, and we did a lot of running back and forth with each other, and that just really mentally wore me down a bit. So, with all that being said, what I did to kind of gain my motivation back and my want to do anything really was a little bit complicated, and a little bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be. A lot of times when I start feeling lack of motivation in my crafting or in my normal day-to-day or whatever it is, I usually do something that I know will bring me contentness, joy, whatever you want to call it, and oftentimes it's by knitting or crocheting. A lot of the time I cannot complete a large or even medium-sized project when I'm feeling that lack of motivation, just because it feels really daunting to complete it. So instead, what I often do is work on some small projects. Specifically, or most commonly, it's my little scrap octos that I make. I don't have any on my desk at the moment, but with every order from my shop, I throw in little scrap octopi. It's only about like 2 inches tall, if I remember correctly, and every order gets one. Or at least now every order gets one. I didn't have any for a while, but now I do. And so I tend to just make like 1 or 2 of those, and if I'm starting to feel a little bit better, maybe I go into a slightly larger project. Maybe I make a bandana. Those only take me like half hour to an hour, depending on the project, or depending on the bandana. And if that continues to feel fine, then I can start transitioning to a larger project. I think part of my problem as well is I put a lot of weight in how quickly I can complete something and how long it takes me to complete. I do this specifically with crocheting. Knitting, I don't do it as much for some reason, because I think it's partially I know all the knitting projects I do, or most of them, are all going to take me a while, so I've come to terms with that essentially. However, with crocheting, even something like the blanket that's on my chair here, that didn't take me nearly as long as I thought it would, because I'm a really fast crocheter overall. So a lot of the times, if I'm still not feeling the energy of any of it, of wanting to do any of it, that's usually just because I'm not mentally ready yet to do that. And that's something that's a little hard to agree with how often I am crocheting or knitting or crafting of some sort. And usually in those cases, if it really is just I'm not ready yet to go back to my hobby or do my thing, I just need to mentally relax. I can physically relax all I want, but I need to mentally relax, and that can be kind of difficult for me. If I just pop on a movie, that usually helps a bit. But a lot of the time as well, when I'm lacking that motivation, it's usually rooted in just general mental wear. And really what that just means is my brain doesn't want to go. My brain, it doesn't want to have thought. I just don't want to do anything. And a lot of times when this used to happen, I used to think it was related to my mental health. I don't really think it is. By related to my mental health, I mean my depression and stuff. I don't think it is. I think I push myself really hard to get things done and to do things. That's what I was saying. This whole video is going to be me trailing off on random subjects. But like I was saying, I do push myself pretty hard with crocheting to get something done in a certain time, which I don't really know why I do that, other than I know I can go quickly, so keep going. So when I have that burnout, it makes it really difficult for me to be okay with doing a project for longer, just because I know I can do better. For example, in a video you guys will see shortly, or if you've been on my TikTok, I started making a pattern for this pocket scarf. But basically, I've been making a lot of those recently, and they only take me 4.5 hours to 5 hours, including sewing on the pockets. But otherwise, it's not too bad. However, when I'm going through that low motivation stint, it's making me really drag on getting one of them done when I know I can do it faster. And so that can be really difficult. So starting with a small project is usually ideal for me, and oftentimes that's either the octos or bandanas. I'm recently started working on a new bandana pattern as well, so that's really exciting. But beside the point. Additionally, a lot of the times for this lack of motivation, it isn't even a lack of wanting to do something, for me at least. It often turns into I want to do it, but I can't make myself do it, if that makes sense. Especially since this is usually my little cruising project that I do at nighttime, when it's nearing bedtime and I just want something to do with my hands. I usually just grab this project. But even then, occasionally I won't want to work on this because I don't feel like I'd make enough progress fast enough. And I think it all kind of just goes back to I need to be a little bit nicer to myself when I am feeling that lack of motivation. And I think all of us need to be nicer to ourselves when we are feeling a type of way. We're only human. It's our first time being people. And it's okay to not want to do something that you enjoy. Some people, especially this happened recently in the TikTok crochet/knitting community, sometimes people will grind really hard on their crafting, and it will work really well for them, and then other times they will almost grow out of the hobby because it becomes unfun for them at that point. And even though that's a little unfortunate to see, it's good to see that they've grown from the hobby. A lot of people, or some people in general, start knitting or crocheting to help with anxiety relief or stress relief, which it very much helps with that. And a lot of the times as well, when people do that and their anxiety or stress is minimized significantly, don't feel the need to knit or crochet or craft at that point, because they've essentially moved forward with that feeling or those emotions. And something similar happened in the TikTok knitting community recently with, there's the knitting sisters, Callie and Kay, and then they have a third sister named Bobby, who semi-recently, like in the last few months, essentially stopped knitting and crocheting altogether, to my knowledge. They no longer find joy in it. It doesn't bring them any fun, enjoyment, anything of that sort. And they've recently taken up sewing instead as a replacement hobby, and they seem to be enjoying that very much, which, more props to you. Sewing is the bane of my existence. I've done quite a few sewing videos on this channel, and I don't love it. I think part of the problem is I'm a little too steadfast. I'm a little too, the reason why sewing is maybe not my favorite thing is because I go too fast and then I mess something up and then I get frustrated. And it took me a long time with knitting and crocheting to just be okay with that kind of thing and start over. I don't think I've hit that limit yet with sewing. Anyway, point is, Bobby grew out of the hobby and found a different hobby that works better for them, and that's fine. That's great. That's awesome. For me, I know that knitting and crocheting are probably going to be a part of my life, probably for the rest of my life. They're something I've done for 10 years plus, 15, 12 years probably at this point, grand total, on and off, but definitely the last 6-7 years for sure. And I know they'll probably be part of my life significantly, or for the long-term part of my life, but there will always be times where life gets too busy, or work gets a little too stressful, or things just get in the way, and I won't want to knit or crochet or craft at all. And I think I just need to learn to be okay with those feelings, because as I was talking to my therapist, she called me out last time we met. And she mentioned that she thinks I use my knitting and crocheting to ease my anxiety, and that in a normal day I feel rather anxious, which is true. I do feel anxious pretty consistently. I've been through some significant things in my life, and if you ever want me to talk about that, let me know. But all in all, they've essentially produced a decent amount of anxiety for me. And with that, I definitely use my knitting and crocheting to help ease the anxiety feelings. So when I don't have the motivation to do knitting or crocheting, I get a little anxiety ridden, and I don't really love that feeling. But like my therapist kind of says, is you sometimes just have to be okay with those feelings and feel them, because otherwise you're not addressing them and you're only making them worse. So I guess all in all, my rant is all over the place, but I think all in all, my main point is, if you're lacking motivation to do something you do on the regular, question why first. Why are you feeling this way? For me, most of the time it's that mental just drain from my job. And once you've kind of addressed that, you can do a couple different things to improve those feelings. Or if you don't feel you're ready yet, you can hold off on attempting to improve those feelings at all until you have processed them and all of that. And then you can probably proceed again with your crafting. Or if you think you're ready, you can do a test like I mentioned. You can do a little miniature octopi, or you can do a gauge swatch for a project. If you mostly knit, you want to knit something small, there are a couple bandana designs you can do, or like little mitts. You can make the first mitt if you want instead, or start the first mitt, get to a certain point on it, and just see how you feel. For me, finding that motivation again after dealing with lack of it, it's really just about assessing how I feel and making achievable goals. So bandana is really easy. It takes me like an hour at most for one of my more complicated designs. Octos, 30 minutes if that. Now something like this, or like the scarves I've been making, instead I'd probably give myself a goal point. So for the scarves I'm making, they're essentially broken up into 4 pieces: the start of the ribbing, the body, top ribbing, and the pockets. So if I'm already on the body part after the first ribbing, I might just say do 2-3 rows. And once I get through those 2-3 rows, how do I feel about where I'm at? And kind of go from there, and continue to do that as needed, of course. I also, like I kind of mentioned, do feel I put a lot of pressure on myself to do stuff well when I don't need to do things well. It doesn't matter if I do things well or not. But there you go. If you have any questions on anything I've talked about, or I went off on a tangent, you want to know more about said tangent, let me know below. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!